The latest incident in the South China Sea once again exposed the growing tension between Beijing and Washington, when a Chinese vessel reportedly crashed in disputed waters and triggered an unexpected response from the United States. The reports coming from maritime tracking and open-source intelligence confirmed that shortly after the accident, two American aircraft carriers moved into the South China Sea. This development immediately drew international attention because it highlighted not only the fragility of maritime safety in contested areas, but also the possibility of miscalculation that could lead to direct confrontation between global superpowers. For the Philippines, which sits at the center of this geopolitical struggle, the event raises deep questions about security, alliances, and the future of freedom of navigation operations. The Chinese ship, according to initial reports, was a large auxiliary vessel that collided with a reef area while maneuvering close to contested waters claimed both by China and neighboring states. Beijing quickly downplayed the incident, calling it a minor accident and denying any serious damage. However, satellite images and independent maritime observers contradicted this version, suggesting that the ship suffered significant hull damage. The vessel's crash did not only embarrass Chinese authorities but also provided an opportunity for rival powers to highlight Beijing's aggressive expansion and unsafe navigation in disputed waters. The fact that the mishap occurred near sensitive maritime lanes made the situation more dangerous because the region is already heavily militarized. The United States, seizing the moment, ordered two of its powerful aircraft carrier strike groups to move toward the South China Sea. The USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Theodore Roosevelt were both redirected to conduct maritime security operations, in what Washington called a demonstration of commitment to free and open seas. Their presence in these waters was not unusual, but the timing made the deployment politically explosive. Within hours, state media in China condemned the action as a provocation, accusing Washington of exploiting a minor accident to assert dominance. At the same time, American defense officials insisted that the deployment was routine, though analysts quickly recognized that it was a deliberate signal of deterrence. Regional allies, including the Philippines, were caught in a difficult position. On one hand, Manila relies heavily on U.S. security guarantees and welcomed the carrier presence as a counterbalance to Chinese maritime pressure. On the other hand, the Philippine government had to consider its economic ties with China, as well as the risks of being dragged into a confrontation that could escalate beyond control. The accident and subsequent U.S. show of force renewed debates within Philippine defense circles about how the country should navigate its role in an increasingly bipolar world order. Some argued that Manila should strengthen cooperation with Washington under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, while others stressed the need for caution and diplomacy to avoid becoming a frontline in a great power clash. Observers from Southeast Asia also pointed out that the incident revealed the lack of effective crisis management mechanisms between the US and China. For years, military-to-military communication channels were either weak or frozen, leaving a high risk of misunderstanding during unexpected situations. A ship crashing in contested waters may appear accidental, but when combined with the sudden arrival of two American carriers, the perception easily shifts toward confrontation. Without confidence-building measures or a functional hotline, the possibility of miscalculation remains high. Both nations might claim they do not want war, but their actions continue to push the region toward instability. The Chinese government attempted to restore control of the narrative by deploying additional Coast Guard and militia vessels in the same area. These so-called maritime militia ships surrounded the damaged vessel and created a cordon to prevent foreign surveillance. At the same time, Beijing's propaganda outlets emphasized that China remains capable of defending its sovereignty despite the accident. Yet analysts noted that the presence of the two U.S. carriers overshadowed these moves, since American naval power still projects unmatched reach and capability. For many countries in the Indo Pacific, this incident reinforced the reality that only Washington can challenge Beijing's assertiveness at sea. Within the Philippines, the defense community highlighted several lessons from the event. First, the crash proved that even China's large and modern fleet is not immune to accidents, raising questions about training, seamanship, and the pressure placed on its forces to operate aggressively in contested zones. Second, the U.S. response illustrated how quickly Washington can mobilize strategic assets to send a political message. Third, The episode showed that Manila's security environment is unpredictable, where accidents or miscalculations by other nations can directly affect Philippine national interest. In the broader strategic context, this latest development comes at a time when the South China Sea dispute is already inflamed by constant encounters between Chinese and Philippine vessels. Fishermen continue to report harassment, resupply missions to outposts such as BRP Sierra Madre face blockades, and Coast Guard standoffs are becoming more violent. The addition of a US-China naval drama adds another layer of complexity. For ordinary Filipinos, the news of aircraft carriers moving into nearby waters may feel distant, but the implications for national security, trade routes, and maritime rights are enormous. Military experts also reminded that the presence of tow carrier strike groups means more than just naval power. It represents air wings, guided missile destroyers, logistics, and a visible demonstration that the United States can operate anywhere despite China's so-called anti-access area denial strategy. The carriers brought with them F/A-18 fighter jets, early warning aircraft, submarines, and supply ships, creating a floating arsenal capable of sustained operations. For Beijing, the challenge is whether it can truly contest this kind of power projection without risking open conflict. For Manila, the image of these carriers also sends a message of reassurance that allies remain engaged in defending international law and maritime order. Diplomatic reactions from the region were mixed. Vietnam expressed concern about navigation safety and reiterated the need for respecting international maritime law. Malaysia and Indonesia issued more neutral statements, calling for restraint. Meanwhile, Japan and Australia voiced strong support for freedom of navigation operations, echoing Washington's stance. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, once again found itself divided, unable to present a unified position. This division highlights why the South China Sea continues to be a flashpoint. Regional states cannot agree on how to deal with Beijing, leaving the balance of power to be determined by external actors. The crash of the Chinese ship might fade from the headlines in the coming weeks, but the presence of US carriers in the South China Sea is unlikely to diminish soon. Both sides are testing each other's resolve, and every move is carefully observed by analysts worldwide. What happened may seem like an isolated incident, yet it reflects the dangerous pattern of rivalry that is shaping the Indo Pacific. For the Philippines, the only certainty is that the waters it depends on for livelihood and trade will remain the front lines of a strategic contest far bigger than itself. Ultimately, this episode shows how fragile peace in the region is. A single accident involving one ship has the potential to draw in nuclear-armed powers and shift military deployments across oceans. It underlines the urgency for dialogue, risk reduction mechanisms, and stronger regional cooperation. Until then, every crash, every maneuver, and every deployment carries with it the possibility of escalation. The South China Sea remains not only a test of maritime boundaries but also a mirror of the future balance of power in Asia.